Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here. Now, if you've seen the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2, you may well have clocked the fact that at one point they said that not every single Switch game is going to be backwards compatible on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, we do know that both digital and physical games from the Nintendo Switch will work on the Switch 2, but that line saying that not all games, it makes people wonder, well, what's it going to be? Is it going to be like a short list of games that are approved? Well, we think we've got a rough idea of what we can and cannot expect to work on the Nintendo Switch 2 in terms of the Nintendo Switch library. It's the Switch 1. However, I do want to say that none of this is official. This is only merely extrapolating and understanding from the limitations of certain games, and indeed the Nintendo Switch, and indeed the Nintendo Switch 2. But even so, none of this is official. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. So, there are a number of different factors we have to consider when it comes to understanding what's going to be compatible and what won't. And I will say early doors that thankfully, all signs are pointing to the fact that a vast majority, an overwhelming majority even, of games for the Nintendo Switch 1 will work on the Nintendo Switch 2. There is no reason why they won't. The Switch 2 may have some sort of backwards compatibility mode or Switch 1 mode or something like that. But either way, if it's anything like previous examples from Nintendo, with the likes of the Wii U playing basically every Wii game, and the same with the 3DS and the original DS, we can assume 99.9% of games are just gonna work. So it's okay. But there are a few little wrinkles to that statement, and they mainly focus around a number of different ideas and limitations of the Switch 2. And the first one that we're going to look at least is that there's no infrared camera on the Switch 2 Joy-Con. Now, people who've been watching a lot of our coverage may say, but Alex, you saw those lines and they look like an IR camera, and it's true. But, number one, we don't know that those are IR cameras. We just don't know. Nintendo haven't made it public, they haven't announced it officially. We don't know that they're infrared cameras, and also, too, this picture that is a lot less compressed than the original kind of suggests that it's just part of the design. We don't know. But if we assume that there is no infrared camera on the Switch 2 Joy-Con left or right, you know, it was only on the right originally, but let's just say that neither one has one, what games won't work? Well, WarioWare Move It. A number of the minigames use the infrared camera in order to function, and without it being there, it's just not going to work. If you put it in the Switch, the game would probably boot and it would run and everything, but then when it comes to the infrared stuff, there's an error or something like that, and to be honest, that applies to pretty much every game in this list. We imagine if you had a physical cartridge and you put it in the Switch 2, it would load it up, but it maybe wouldn't function fully. But who knows, maybe Nintendo's flagged a few games and have just, gonna put a pop-up saying, this game doesn't run, or this game won't function properly, but you can still load it. Again, we don't know. 1-2 Switch also had it. One mini game had it, with the one with the sandwich where you go nim 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 nim. You're supposed to pretend you're eating a sandwich. It was certainly something. Again, if there's no IR camera, it's just not gonna work, because it's looking for an input that it's never gonna get. Ring Fit Adventure, it's not gonna work because it requires the infrared camera to take your heart rate. And I'm fairly certain from memory you can skip those, but even so, it's an important functionality of the game that just won't work. So, I mean, to be honest, you could argue that about every game in this list. No game, as far as I'm aware, beyond one, need the infrared camera to function in any way. Brain Age requires you to do a weird thing with the Joy-Con where you like put the number up using your fingers or something like that. That ain't gonna work. Game Builder Garage has the infrared camera as an option for any of the games you build. It's very much an option, and we're certain not actually required. Well, we know it's not, but even so, that's part of the functionality that's just not gonna work. And the big one you've been waiting for, yes, Nintendo Labo, basically all of the different Toy-Con aren't gonna work. They're just not, because they need the infrared camera. They're looking for those reflective stickers that you've built and stuck on in hopefully the right place, and it just won't be able to see them. It just won't. There are a few that will work, things like the little RC car, like that will work, because it doesn't need the IR camera, funnily enough, but you know, you're missing out on a good vast majority of the functionality, like 80, 90%. It's just not going to work. It's just not. It needs the IR camera. But there is one game that we found where it is absolutely necessary to have any functionality in the game whatsoever, and that is night vision. I genuinely forgot the name of it. This is I'm reluctant to call it a game that you download on the eShop, and it basically just allows you to look through the IR camera and puts a green filter on it. Sorry, that's not going to work on Switch 2 if there's no infrared. That seems to be the most likely scenario, that there's no infrared camera, and so those games, those little bits of functionality just won't work. Who knows, maybe Nintendo will release a patch that sort of like just shoves that aside or just ignores those or disables those, whatever. We don't know, but you know, those seem like fairly safe bets, if indeed that is the reason for Nintendo putting up that little banner. Another possibility, however, is just that the Joy-Con from the Switch 1 just won't work. They just won't connect. It's, you know, it just doesn't talk to them. Seems unlikely to me, but you know, it's a possibility, in which case there are actually a few games where that won't work. I mean, arguably if they do connect, then all of the IR stuff will work. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. But if these original Joy-Con don't work, they don't connect for whatever reason, then there are a few games that are going to suffer and become essentially dead. And number one of those is Ring Fit Adventure, which is a real shame because you need this with its rail and its specific connectivity to go into the Ring-Con. And the game won't work without it. This really would be a crying shame because I love Ring Fit Adventure. I haven't played it in a long time, but it has a lot of very fond memories for me, and I kind of want to see if it'll work with the Switch too, and you know, if there are any sort of enhancements or anything like that. Is it going to be a high resolution? Any number of things? I'll never know unless it probably will. Again, this will probably boot even if these aren't working. And the other one? It's Labo again. You know, even the RC car isn't going to be able to work because it's not going to have this rail. It's not going to be able to fit on, and so it's not going to work. Simple as that. There is another category, in fact another two categories, but one of them is minute. And these are games where we can be fairly certain they are just flat out not going to work on Switch 2, at least not officially and not as intended. Again, they may well run, but they might not work. Thankfully, it's mostly small features of bigger games. And the first one, it's Labo again. Yes, Labo VR specifically is just not going to work. And it took me a while, actually, when planning this video to realize Labo VR doesn't even work with the OLED because it's too big. It's just not the right size. The optics and everything and the screen, it's all designed for the original Switch, and the OLED is just different. It's just a different form factor, and it won't work. I have seen there are some third-party solutions online that supposedly allow you to play Labo VR and other VR games on the OLED, but I'm not buying those. I just assume they're going to work. But officially, Labo VR will not work. Nintendo will not provide support for it, and if you ask anyone casually, does Labo VR work? They'll go, no, it doesn't work, if they even know what you're talking about. The third-party argument is the same as saying like, oh, do Wii U Pro controllers, do they work on the Switch? The answer is essentially no, but there are adapters that allow it. But at the end of the day, it's not official. Blimey, it's been a while since I've used you. And yes, the rest of the games on this list are indeed VR games, or at least have VR modes. For example, Spice and Wolf VR. I actually had a housemate at uni who was really into this series for some reason, or at least the books and stuff. And at one point, due to a miscommunication, I don't know, everyone else in the house, myself included, just refused to call it anything except Spicy Wolf. This is a tradition I intend to uphold. Spicy Wolf VR will not work, again for the same reasons I said before. The Switch 2 will be a different form factor and will not work with the Labo VR headset, and the same goes for Spicy Wolf VR 2. There's another game that I believe can be played exclusively in VR, although again, it may not have to be. I'm not buying it just to find this out. It's called The Knight and the Queen, or The Knight of the Queen? The Knight of Queen! It appears to be a fairly simple first-person RPG that can be played in VR on Switch. It's a novelty. It's a novelty. Super Mario Odyssey, that has a VR mode. It's absolutely nothing to write home about, but that VR mode, it's not going to work. It's just not. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, you can look around stages and stuff like that in VR or something to that effect. I genuinely can't remember. I'd forgotten that Smash even had a VR mode until I did more research for this video. That's not gonna work. Breath of the Wild! I remembered this one because it's absolutely nauseating. If anyone's unaware, you can play the whole game in VR, the whole of Breath of the Wild in VR. Does that sound like fun? It's not! Mainly because the pivot point isn't tied to your perspective or the camera's perspective, but in fact from Link. So when you turn like this in VR, you know, sort of you would expect the camera to pivot here and turn like that. It doesn't, it pivots around there. So instead, as you turn like this, the camera goes like this. And it's absolutely vomit-inducing and no one should ever do it. And lastly for this category, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. It has a VR mode that's just not going to work, for the same reasons I listed above. I'm repeating myself. The final category is a single game, and this is more of a big old question mark, and that is Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. And oh my god, I think I got that name right first time. This is definitely more of a wobbly, iffy one, because the main reason it wouldn't work is because the Switch 2 won't, like, recognize the actual cars, because it takes physical cars? It has physical cars. And if it doesn't have that functionality built in, it's not going to connect. Maybe it uses some sort of, I don't know, Wi-Fi or something? I've never looked into it because, to be honest, I don't care about the specifics of how it works. But there is a distinct possibility that it is just not going to work. Like, you scan the QR code with the little camera and everything, and it just goes, can't find a Switch. What are you talking about? It's a distinct possibility. We're just going to have to wait and see on that one. And I know you all will, with bated breath. And as far as we can tell, those are all the games that may not work on Switch 2 for the reasons we've listed throughout the video. However, there is still a possibility that they will. We don't know. But the main takeaway we want to give you from this is that a vast majority of the Switch games are going to work. Like, there's no chance that Super Mario Odyssey won't work on Switch 2 in some capacity, despite having a VR mode that won't work with the established, official Nintendo Switch Toy-Con thing. There may well be some smaller games that we haven't mentioned. In fact, let us know what they are in the comments down below, because we're keen to see what your research has turned up. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you go ahead and interact with that subscribe button. We promise it is compatible with your device. And be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye. As you've seen, no doubt that so many people do reach out and lean on something that isn't there because the immersion's so great. Unlikely or may not work on Switch 2 due to the reasons we listed. That's not good.